So there's several different kinds of errors that we can get when we do a hypothesis test, because we really never know what's going on underneath. We're just getting our best guess from the data that we have. A type 1 error, okay, is when we go through and reject the null hypothesis because we thought we had enough evidence, but in reality, the null is really true. So sometimes they'll talk about, you know, sending an innocent person to get to jail. So I think I did a nice little chart here for you. So there's sort of the reality, and we never know whether H naught is really true or H naught is really false. We don't know whether we're on this track or this track because we don't actually know whether H naught is true or not. But we do know the decision that we're going to make based on the p-value that we got, right? Is we could not reject H naught or reject it. Now, if H naught is really true and we don't reject it, that's the correct decision, right? But in this case, we're talking about this idea, well, if you reject H naught when H naught is really true, we've made the incorrect decision. And this is what they're calling this type 1 error. This is type 1 error. Okay. The other type of error is if we go through and H naught is really false. Ideally, if that's the case, we would want to not reject the null hypothesis, right? This would be the correct decision to make. But if you decide to do not reject it, then that's your type 1 or type 2 error. Okay. So your type 1 error, we have been calling that alpha. Okay, and that's usually what we fix. In this particular case, we tell you beforehand, based on the context or the discipline, that we're willing to accept a 5% error rate or a 10% error rate or a 1% error rate. That'll be given ahead of time. The type 2 error rate, we call that beta. Now, in an ideal world, you'd love, right, for both of those error rates to be small. You know, we want to be making the correct decisions. There's, again, we can go back to this example of, you know, sending, you know, a person can be truly guilty or a person can be truly innocent. And ideally, we want to be sending guilty people to jail, and we want to be sending innocent people and free, right? But, you know, things aren't always easy, right? And if you have a really strict judge, they might be more apt to send people to jail. So you're not going to get people going free that shouldn't, but maybe they're more likely to send even innocent people to jail. Not good, right? But then also, you know, you might have a more lenient judge who, you know, doesn't really want to put someone in jail unless they're totally sure, which means that you have a lot of, you know, the innocent people going free as they should, but you run the risk that there might be some guilty people that go free. And there's no perfect world where we can make sure that both of those things happen. We can try our best, but there's always going to be sort of mistakes. And in this case, for hypothesis testing, it's always a trade-off between the two. And so we're going to have a little bit of discussion around, well, which one is the worst type of error to make? And I think this is more of a judgment call, a moral call. This is not something that I can tell you, statistics says this. It's really going to depend on the context of the problem, and it's going to depend on your value system, which one you think is worse. So I also like to always show this picture because I think it demonstrates the concept a little bit in a clear way. A type 1 error is a false positive, right? We've rejected the null hypothesis. We're going with this alternative. In this case, they're telling this man that he's pregnant, when in reality, he's definitely not, right? And a type 2 error you can think of as a false negative. So in this case, the test says that they're not pregnant when, you know, in fact, they really are. And again, in both cases, those are errors, they're bad, but it's sort of up to a moral judgment or knowing more about the context to try to decide which one would be worse. In this particular example, a type 1 error, right, that would be rejecting the null hypothesis when H naught is true, right? So let's just specify in this particular case, that would be concluding that they're underfilling the bags when in fact the company is filling them properly. A type 2 error in this case is when we do not reject H naught when HA is true, right? Or H naught is not true, okay? So in this case, it would be concluding they are filling the bags properly when in fact they are underfilling. So, you know, in the case of type error 1, right, this is this, you know, they're truly innocent, right? They're doing what they should be doing, and we're gathering evidence that says, you know, concluding that they've done something wrong when in fact they haven't. You know, and that could be very costly to the company. There's going to be a lot of, you know, legal fees to go through sort of making this claim. A lot of time and effort to sort of go down this route when in fact, you know, they're really innocent. And then a type 2 error in this case is, you know, we're sort of, they are guilty, right? They're doing something wrong. They're underfilling these bags, but we're concluding that they're doing it properly. So in this case, it's good in that we're saving some time, not going through this legal route and having to go through things, but we are, you know, we've let, you know, it's not fair to the consumers, right? Because the consumers are truly not getting as much product as they think they've paid for. So again, both are bad, but you might have to make a trade-off, which one you think is better, depending on your value system, depending on who you work for, right? You know, if you work for the potato chip company, you might feel differently than if you're a government organization or if you're doing consumer advocacy. So there's sort of a lot of debate, but yeah, it's just sort of worth thinking about.